Chapter 1. Oliver's Early Life. Oliver Twist was born in a workhouse, and when he arrived in this hard world, it was very doubtful whether he would live beyond the first 3 minutes. He lay on a hard little bed and struggled to start breathing. Oliver fought his first battle without much assistance from the 2 people present at his birth. One was an old woman who was nearly always drunk, and the other was a busy local doctor who was not paid enough to be very interested in Oliver's survival. After all, death was a common event in the workhouse, where only the poor and homeless lived. However, Oliver managed to draw his first breath and then announced his arrival to the rest of the workhouse by crying loudly. His mother raised her pale young face from the pillow and whispered, "Let me see the child and die." The doctor turned away from the fire where he had been warming his hands. "You must not talk about dying yet," he said to her kindly. He gave her the child to hold. Lovingly, she kissed the baby on its forehead with her cold white lips, then stared wildly around the room, fell back, and died. "Poor dear," said the nurse, hurriedly putting a green glass bottle back in the pocket of her long skirt. The doctor began to put on his coat. "The baby is weak and will probably have difficulties," he said. "If so, give it a little milk to keep it quiet." Then he looked at the dead woman. The mother was a good-looking girl. Where did she come from? "She was brought here last night," replied the old woman. "She was found lying in the street. She'd walked some distance, judging by her shoes, which were worn to pieces. Where she came from, where she was going to, or what her name was, nobody knows." The doctor lifted the girl's left hand. "The old story," he said sadly, shaking his head. "No wedding ring, I see. Ah, good night." And so Oliver was left with only the drunken nurse. Without clothes under his first blanket, he could have been the child of a king or a beggar. But when the woman dressed him later in rough cotton clothes, yellow with age, he looked exactly what he was, an orphan in a workhouse, ready for a life of misery, hunger, and neglect. Oliver cried loudly. If he could have known that he was a workhouse orphan, perhaps he would have cried even more loudly. There was no one to look after the baby in the workhouse, so Oliver was sent to a special baby farm nearby. There, he and 30 other children rolled around the floor all day without the inconvenience of too much food or too much clothing. Mrs. Mann, the old woman who looked after them, was very experienced. She knew what was good for children, and a full stomach was very dangerous to their health. She also knew what was good for herself, so she kept for her own use the money that she was given for the children's food. The board responsible for the orphans sometimes checked on the health of the children, but they always sent the beadle, a kind of local policeman, to announce their visit the day before. So whenever the board arrived, of course, the children were always neat and clean. This was the way Oliver was brought up. Consequently, at the age of 9, he was a pale, thin child and short for his age. But despite frequent beatings by Mrs. Mann, his spirit was strong, which was probably the reason why he managed to reach the age of 9 at all. On Oliver's 9th birthday, Mr. Bumble the Beadle came to the house to see Mrs. Mann. Through the front window, Mrs. Mann saw him at the gate and turned quickly to the girl who worked with her. "Quick, take Oliver and those others upstairs to be washed," she said. Then she ran out to unlock the gate. It was always kept locked to prevent official visitors walking in unexpectedly. "I have business to talk about," Mr. Bumble told Mrs. Mann as he entered the house. He was a big fat man, often bad-tempered, and was full of self-importance. He did not like to be kept waiting at a locked gate. Mrs. Mann took his hat and coat, placed a chair for him, and expressed great concern for his comfort. "You've had a long walk, Mr. Bumble," she said, "and you must be thirsty." She took out a bottle from the cupboard. "No, thank you, Mrs. Mann. Not a drop." He waved the bottle away. "Just little drop, Mr. Bumble, with cold water," said Mrs. Mann persuasively. Mr. Bumble coughed. "What is it?" he asked, looking at the bottle with interest. "Gin. I keep it for the children's medicine drink." "You give the children gin, Mrs. Mann?" asked Mr. Bumble, watching as she mixed his drink. "Only with medicine, sir. I don't like to see them suffer." "You're a good woman, Mrs. Mann." Mr. Bumble drank half his glass immediately. "I'll tell the board about you. Now, the reason why I'm here. Oliver Twist is 9 years old today. We've never been able to discover anything about his parents." "Then how did he get his name?" "I gave it to him," said Mr. Bumble proudly. "We follow the alphabet. The last one was an S, Swubble. Then it was T, so this one is Twist. The next one will be Unwin. Anyway, Oliver Twist is now old enough to return to the workhouse. Bring him here, please." While Mrs. Mann went to get him, Mr. Bumble finished the rest of his gin. Oliver, his face and hands now almost clean, was led into the room. "Will you come along with me, Oliver?" asked Mr. Bumble in a loud voice. Oliver was very glad to be free of Mrs. Mann's violence, but he said nothing because she was angrily shaking her finger at him. However, as the gate closed behind Oliver, he burst into tears. He was leaving behind the other children, the only friends he had, and he realized at that moment how lonely he was in the world. Mr. Bumble walked on with long steps, with Oliver on his short little legs running beside him. The feeling of contentment produced by gin and water had now disappeared, and the beetle was in a bad mood once more. Back at the workhouse, Oliver was taken to see the board. He stood in front of 10 fat men who were sitting around a table. "What's your name, boy?" asked a particularly fat man with a very round, red face. Oliver was frightened at the sight of so many people and started to cry. "Why are you crying?" The beetle hit him on the back, and so naturally Oliver cried even more. "The boy is a fool," one member of the board announced. "You know you have no father or mother," said the first man, "and that you have been brought up with other orphans?" "Yes, sir," replied Oliver, crying bitterly. "Why is the boy crying?" repeated the other man, puzzled. "You have come here to be educated," continued the fat man. "So you will start working here tomorrow at 6 o'clock. Oliver was led away to a large room where, on a rough, hard bed, he cried himself to sleep. The room in the workhouse where the boys were fed was a large stone hall, and at one end the master and 2 women served the food. This consisted of a bowl of thin soup 3 times a day, with a piece of bread on Sundays. The boys ate everything and were always hungry. The bowls never needed washing. The boys polished them with their spoons until they shone. After 3 months of this slow starvation, one of the boys told the others he was so hungry that one night he might eat the boy who slept next to him. He had a wild, hungry eye, and the other boys believed him. After a long discussion, they decided that one of them should ask for more food after supper that evening, and Oliver was chosen. The evening arrived, the soup was served, and the bowls were empty again in a few seconds. Oliver went up to the master with his bowl in his hand. He felt very frightened, but also desperate with hunger. "Please, sir, I want some more." The master was a fat, healthy man, but he turned very pale. He looked at the little boy in front of him with amazement. Nobody else spoke. "What?" he asked at last in a faint voice. "Please, sir," replied Oliver, "I want some more." The master hit him with the serving spoon, then seized Oliver's arms and shouted for the beadle. The beadle came quickly, heard the dreadful news, and immediately ran to tell the board. He asked for more. Mr. Limbkins, the fattest board member, asked in horror, "Bumble, is this really true?" "That boy will be hanged," said the man who earlier had called Oliver a fool. "You see if I'm not right." Oliver was led away to be locked up, and a reward was offered to anybody who would take him away and use him for work. Chapter 2. Oliver's first job. Oliver stayed a prisoner alone in the dark room for a week. He cried bitterly all day, and when the long night came, he spread his little hands over his eyes to shut out the darkness and tried to sleep. He was given freezing water to wash with and was beaten daily by Mr. Bumble in front of all the other boys in the hall, as a warning to them. One day Mr. Bumble met the local undertaker, Mr. Sowerberry, outside the workhouse. "Do you know anybody who wants to train a boy for work, Mr. Sowerberry?" Mr. Bumble pointed at the notice on the wall above him, which offered £5 to anybody who would take Oliver Twist for work. Mr. Sowerberry rubbed his chin and thought for a while. "I pay enough for the poor with my taxes," he said, "so why shouldn't I be able to make use of them in my work? Yes, I'll take the boy myself." And so the board agreed to send Oliver to work for the undertaker. The necessary papers were signed. Oliver's small possessions were put into a brown paper parcel, and he was led to Mr. Sowerberry's house by Mr. Rumble. As they walked along, tears began to run down Oliver's face. "What is it this time?" asked Mr. Bumble impatiently. "Don't be so ungrateful. This gentleman is going to look after you." "It's just that I'm so lonely, sir," said the child. "Everybody hates me. Please don't be angry with me, sir." Even Mr. Bumble felt a little pity. He coughed, told Oliver to dry his eyes and be a good boy, and walked on with him in silence. The undertaker had just finished work for the day when Mr. Bumble entered his shop. "Here, I've brought the boy," said the beadle. Oliver bowed to the undertaker, who raised his candle to get a better view of the boy. "Mrs. Sowerberry," he called, "come and have a look." His wife, a short, thin woman with a disagreeable face, came out to see. "He's very small," she said immediately. "He is," agreed Mr. Bumble, "but he'll grow, Mrs. Sowerberry." "Yes," she said crossly, "when he eats our food. Go on, get downstairs." She pushed Oliver downstairs into a damp, dark kitchen and called to the girl working down there. Here, Charlotte, give this boy some meat that the dog left, if he thinks it's good enough for him. Oliver tore the meat to pieces with his teeth as if he were a wild animal. Mrs. Sowerberry watched him in silent horror, already thinking about her future food bills, then took him upstairs to the shop. "You'll sleep here, among the coffins," she said. Oliver stared around the dark, airless shop at the coffins, some finished, some only half made. He trembled at the thought of ghosts. His bed was a small hole in the floor and looked very like a grave. But it was not only the room that depressed Oliver. He felt very lonely, with no friends and no one to care for him. As he lay on the bed, he found himself wishing that it really was his grave. The next morning he was woken up by someone kicking at the shop door. "Open the door, will you?" shouted a voice through the keyhole. "Yes, sir." "I suppose you're the new boy," said the voice through the keyhole. "How old are you?" "10, sir." "Then I'll hit you when I get in," said the voice. Oliver was experienced enough to know that the promise was probably true. He opened the door with a shaking hand, then looked up and down the street. All he could see was a large boy wearing the uniform of one of the charity schools, where the children of the very poor used to go. "Did you want a coffin?" asked Oliver innocently. The charity boy looked at him fiercely. "You'll be needing a coffin soon, workhouse, if you make jokes like that. I'm Mr. Noah Claypole and you're working under me. Now hurry up and open the curtains." As he said this, he kicked Oliver and entered the shop. He was a big, clumsy boy of about 14, with a large head and very small eyes. Added to these attractions were a red nose and dirty yellow trousers. The boys went down to breakfast, which the girl Charlotte had made for them. She gave an extra piece of meat to Noah, then told Oliver to hurry up as it was his job to look after the shop. "Did you hear that, workhouse?" shouted Noah. "He heard Noah," said Charlotte. "Leave him alone." "Why?" asked Noah. "All his relations have already left him alone. His mother and father aren't going to interfere with him." Charlotte and Noah both started laughing loudly. Oliver sat alone in the corner, eating old bits of bread. Noah was a charity boy, but not a workhouse orphan. He at least knew who his parents were. But for a long time, all the local shop boys had insulted him because he wore the uniform of a charity boy. Now fortune had brought him a creature in an even lower position in society than himself. Noah intended to repay to Oliver every insult he had ever received, and to make the new boy's life a misery. After a few weeks, Mr. Sowerberry decided that he liked Oliver's appearance enough to train him in the undertaking business. Oliver's permanent expression of sadness was very suitable, the undertaker thought, for collecting dead bodies from houses and accompanying the coffins to funerals. One day Mr. Bumble came to tell them about a woman who had died in an extremely poor part of the town, and Sowerberry and Oliver went to collect the body. They went down dusty, narrow streets where the houses on either side were tall and large, but very old. Some of the houses were almost falling down and had to be supported by huge blocks of wood. The area was so poor that even the dead rats in the street looked as though they had died of hunger. They found the right house and climbed the dark stairs to a miserable little room. Some children watched them from the shadows as they entered. Something lay beneath a blanket on the floor in one corner. A man and an old woman stood near the body. Oliver was afraid to look at them. With their thin faces and sharp teeth, they looked like the rats he had seen outside. As Sowerberry began to measure the body for a coffin, the man knelt on the floor and cried out, "She starved to death, I tell you. That's why she died." He fell to the floor, and all the children behind him started to cry. Sowerberry and Oliver, their work done, left as fast as they could. They returned the next day with the coffin and 4 men from the workhouse who were to carry it. The man and the old woman followed the coffin to the church and waited silently by the grave for the priest to arrive. When at last he came, he hurried through the burial prayers, and as quickly as possible, it was only a job after all. The coffin was put into the ground. At this point, the husband, who had not moved once during his wife's burial, not even during the long wait for the priest, suddenly fainted to the ground and had to have cold water thrown over him. "So, how did you like it, Oliver?" asked Sowerberry later as they walked home. "Not very much, sir," Oliver answered truthfully. "You'll get used to it, my boy." Oliver wondered how long that would take and remained silent all the way back to the shop, thinking about everything that he had seen and heard. Chapter 3. Oliver goes to London. Oliver was now officially an undertaker's assistant. It was a good, sickly time of year, and coffins were selling well. Oliver gained a lot of experience in a short time, and was interested to see how brave some people were after a death in the family. During funerals for some rich people, for example, he saw that the people who had cried the loudest in church usually recovered the fastest afterwards. He noticed how in other wealthy families the wife or the husband often seemed quite cheerful and calm despite the recent death, just as if nothing had happened. Oliver was very surprised to see all this and greatly admired them for controlling their sadness so well. He was treated badly by most of the people around him. Noah was jealous because Oliver went out to burials while he was left back in the shop, so he treated him even worse than before. Charlotte treated him badly because Noah did, and Mrs. Sowerberry was his enemy because Mr. Sowerberry was supposed to be his friend. One day something happened which might seem unimportant, but which had a great effect on Oliver's future. Noah was in a particularly bad mood one dinner time, and so he tried to make Oliver cry by hitting him, pulling his hair and calling him horrible names. This was all unsuccessful, so he tried personal insults. "Workhouse, how's your mother?" he asked. "She's dead," replied Oliver, his face going red with emotion. Noah hoped that Oliver was going to cry, so he continued, "What did she die of, Workhouse?" "Of a broken heart, I was told," and a tear rolled down Oliver's cheek. "Why are you crying, Workhouse?" Oliver remained silent, and Noah grew braver. "You know, I feel very sorry for you, Workhouse, but the truth is, your mother was a wicked woman." Oliver seemed suddenly to wake up. "What did you say?" "She was so bad it was lucky she died, or she would have ended up in prison, or hung." His face bright red with anger, Oliver jumped up, seized Noah's throat, and shook the older boy so violently that his teeth nearly fell out. Then he hit him with all his strength and knocked him to the ground. "He'll murder me!" screamed Noah. "Charlotte, help! Oliver's gone mad!" Charlotte and Mrs. Sowerberry ran in and screamed in horror. They took hold of Oliver and began to beat him. Then Noah got up and started to kick him from behind. When they were all tired, they forced Oliver, who was still fighting and shouting, into the cellar and locked it. Mrs. Sowerberry sat down, breathing heavily. "He's like a wild animal," she said. "We could all have been murdered in our beds." "I hope Mr. Sowerberry doesn't take any more of these dreadful creatures from the workhouse," said Charlotte. "Poor Noah was nearly killed." Mrs. Sowerberry looked at Noah sympathetically. Noah, who was twice Oliver's size, pretended to rub tears from his eyes. "What shall we do?" cried Mrs. Sowerberry. "He'll kick that door down in 10 minutes. They could hear Oliver banging and kicking at the cellar door. "Noah, run and get Mr. Bumble." So Noah ran through the streets as quickly as he could to fetch the beadle. When he reached the workhouse, he waited for a minute to make sure his face was suitably tearful and frightened. As soon as Mr. Bumble came out, Noah cried, "Mr. Bumble! Mr. Bumble! It's Oliver Twist, sir. He's become violent. He tried to murder me, sir, and Charlotte and Mrs. Sowerberry as well." Mr. Bumble was shocked and angry. "Did he? I'll come up there immediately and beat him with my stick." When he arrived at the shop, Oliver was still kicking wildly at the cellar door. "Let me out!" he shouted from the cellar when he heard Mr. Bumble's voice. "I'm not afraid of you." Mr. Bumble stopped for a moment, amazed and even rather frightened by this change in Oliver. Then he said to Mrs. Sowerberry, "It's the meat that's caused this, you know." "What? Meat, madam? You've fed him too well here. Back in the workhouse, this would never have happened." "I knew I was too generous to him," said Mrs. Sowerberry, raising her eyes to the ceiling. At that moment, Mr. Sowerberry returned, and, hearing what had happened, according to the ladies, he beat Oliver so hard that even Mr. Bumble and Mrs. Sowerberry were satisfied. Mr. Sowerberry was not a cruel man, but he had no choice. He knew that if he didn't punish Oliver, his wife would never forgive him. That night, alone in the room with the coffins, Oliver cried bitter, lonely tears. He did not sleep, and very early in the morning, before anyone was awake, he quietly unlocked the shop door and left the house. He ran up the street and through the town as far as the main road, where he saw a sign that told him it was just 70 miles from there to London. The name London gave the boy an idea. That huge place. Nobody, not even Mr. Bumble, could ever find him there. He had heard old men in the workhouse say it was a good place for brave boys, and that there was always work there for those that wanted it. It would be the best place for him. He jumped to his feet and walked forward again. But after only 4 miles, he began to realize just how far he would have to walk. He stopped to think about it. He had a piece of bread, a rough shirt, 2 pairs of socks, and a penny. But he could not see how these would help him get to London any faster, so he continued walking. He walked 20 miles that day. The only thing he had to eat was his piece of bread and some water which he begged from houses near the road. He slept the first night in a field, feeling lonely, tired, cold, and hungry. He was even hungrier the next morning when he woke up, and he had to buy some more bread with his penny. That day he walked only 12 miles. His legs were so weak that they shook beneath him. The next day he tried to beg for money, but large signs in some villages warned him that anyone caught begging would be sent to prison. Travellers on the road refused to give him money. They said he was a lazy young dog and didn't deserve anything. Farmers threatened to send their dogs after him. When he waited outside pubs, the pub owners chased him away because they thought he had come to steal something. Only 2 people were kind enough to feed him, an old woman and a gatekeeper on the road. If they had not given him some food, he surely would have died like his mother. Early on the 7th morning of his journey, Oliver finally reached the little town of Barnet, just outside London. Exhausted, he sat down at the side of the road. His feet were bleeding and he was covered in dust. He was too tired even to beg. Then he noticed that a boy who had passed him a few minutes before had returned and was now looking at him carefully from the opposite side of the road. After a long time, the boy crossed the road and said to Oliver, "Hello, what's the matter then?" The boy was about Oliver's age, but was one of the strangest-looking people he had ever seen. He had a dirty, ordinary boy's face, but he behaved as if he were an adult. He was short for his age and had little, sharp, ugly eyes. His hat was stuck on top of his head, but it looked as though it would blow off at any minute. He wore a man's coat which reached almost down to his feet, with sleeves so long that his hands were completely covered. "I'm very tired and hungry," answered Oliver, almost crying. "I've been walking for a week." "A week? The magistrate's order, was it?" "The magistrate? What's that?" "A magistrate's a kind of judge," explained the surprised young gentleman. He realized Oliver did not have much experience of the world. "Never mind that, you want some food," he went on. "I haven't got much money, but don't worry. I'll pay." The boy helped Oliver to his feet and took him to a pub. Meat, bread, and beer were placed before Oliver, and his new friend urged him to satisfy his hunger. While Oliver was eating, the strange boy looked at him from time to time with great attention. "Going to London?" he asked him finally. "Yes." "Got anywhere to live?" "No." "Money?" "No." The strange boy whistled and put his arms into his pockets as far as the big coat sleeves would allow him. "I suppose you want to sleep somewhere tonight, don't you?" "I do," replied Oliver. "I haven't slept under a roof since I started my journey." "Well, don't worry. I've got to be in London tonight, and I know a very nice old gentleman there who'll let you live in his place and not even ask you for money." Oliver was deeply grateful for this offer of shelter and talked for a long time with his new friend. His name was Jack Dawkins, but he was usually called the Artful Dodger. Artful because he was very clever at getting what he wanted, and Dodger because he was very good at not getting caught when he did something wrong. When he heard this, Oliver felt rather doubtful about having such a friend. However, he wanted first to meet the kind old gentleman in London who would help him. After that, he could decide whether to continue the friendship with the Artful Dodger. Chapter 4. Oliver in London. For some reason, the Dodger did not want to enter London during daylight, so it was nearly 11 o'clock at night when they got near the centre. Oliver had never seen a dirtier or more miserable place. The streets in this district were narrow and muddy, and there were terrible smells everywhere. Children wandered around even at this time of night, in and out of the many shops, playing and screaming. The pubs were full of people fighting, and big, evil-looking men stood in doorways or at dark corners. Oliver almost wanted to run away, but just then the Dodger pushed open a door and pulled Oliver into a dark hall. "Who's there?" a voice cried out. "It's me," said the Dodger. The faint light of a candle appeared in the hall. "Who's the other one?" "A new friend." They went up some dark and broken stairs. Oliver could hardly see where he was going, but the Dodger seemed to know the way and helped Oliver up. They entered a room with walls that were black with age and dirt. In front of the fire was a table with a candle stuck into a bottle of beer, and an old man with a horribly ugly face and red hair stood next to the fire cooking. He was wearing a dirty old coat and seemed to divide his attention between his cooking and a number of silk handkerchiefs which were hanging near the fire. There were several rough beds in the room. 4 or 5 boys, about the same age as the artful Dodger, sat round the table smoking and drinking like middle-aged men. They all looked up when the Dodger and Oliver entered. "This is him, Fagin," the Dodger said to the old man. "My friend Oliver Twist." Fagin smiled and shook Oliver's hand. Then all the young gentlemen came up to him and shook both his hands very hard, especially the hand which held his few possessions. One of the boys was particularly kind. He even put his hands in Oliver's pockets so that Oliver would not have to empty them himself when he went to bed. The boys would probably have been even more helpful, but Fagin hit them on their heads and shoulders until they left Oliver alone. "We're very glad to see you, Oliver," said Fagin. "I see you're staring at the handkerchiefs, my dear. Aren't there a lot? We've just taken them all out to wash them, that's all. Ha, 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 ha." This seemed to be a joke as the old gentleman and all his young friends gave loud shouts of laughter. Then supper began. Oliver ate his share of the food and was then given a glass of gin and water. Fagin told him to drink it fast. Immediately afterwards, Oliver felt himself lifted onto one of the beds, and he sank into a deep sleep. When he woke, it was late morning. Fagin was the only other person in the room, and he was boiling coffee in a pan. When the coffee was done, he turned towards Oliver and looked closely at the boy. Oliver was only just awake and his eyes were half closed, so he seemed to be still fall asleep. Fagin then locked the door, and from a hidden hole in the floor he took out a small box, which he placed carefully on the table. His eyes shone as he opened it and took out a gold watch covered in jewels. "Ah," he said to himself, "what fine men they were, loyal to the end. They never told the priest where the jewels were. Not about old Fagin, not even at the very end. And why should they? It was already too late. It wouldn't have stopped the rope going round their necks." Fagin took out at least 6 more watches, as well as rings and bracelets, and many other valuable pieces of jewellery. He looked at them with pleasure, then replaced them. "What a good thing hanging is," he murmured. "Dead men can never talk, or betray old friends." At that moment he looked up and saw Oliver watching him. He closed the lid of the box with a loud crash and picked up a bread knife from the table. Why are you watching me? What have you seen? Tell me, quick." "I couldn't sleep any longer, sir," said Oliver, terrified. "I'm very sorry." "You weren't awake an hour ago?" Fagin asked fiercely, still holding the knife. "I promise I wasn't, sir," replied Oliver. "Don't worry, my dear," Fagin said, putting down the knife and becoming once again the kind old gentleman. He laughed. "I only tried to frighten you, my dear. You're a brave boy, Oliver. And did you see any of the pretty things?" "Yes, sir." "Ah," said Fagin, turning rather pale. They're mine, Oliver. All I have, in my old age." Oliver wondered why the old man lived in such an old, dirty place when he had so many watches. But then he thought that it must cost Fagin a lot of money to look after the Dodger and the other boys. So he said nothing and got up and washed. When he turned towards Fagin, the box had disappeared. Soon the Dodger entered with a cheerful young man named Charlie Bates. "Have you been at work this morning?" Fagin asked the Dodger. "Hard at work," answered the Dodger. Good boys," said Fagin. "What have you got?" "A couple of pocketbooks and some handkerchiefs." "Good workers, aren't they, Oliver?" said the old man. "Very good," said Oliver. The others all started laughing, though Oliver saw nothing funny in his answer. Fagin inspected the handkerchiefs and told the two boys that they were extremely well made and that he was very pleased with their work. After breakfast, they played a very strange game. The cheerful old man put a watch in his jacket pocket, with a guard chain round his neck, and a notebook and a handkerchief in his trouser pocket. Then he went up and down the room holding a walking stick, just like the old gentleman who walked in the streets. Sometimes he stopped at the fireplace and sometimes at the door, pretending to stare with great interest into shop windows. He would then constantly look round, as if afraid of thieves, touching all his pockets in such a natural and funny way that Oliver laughed until the tears ran down his face. All the time the two boys followed Fagin everywhere, and every time he turned round, they moved out of his sight so quickly that it was impossible to follow their movements. Finally, the Dodger bumped into him accidentally from behind, and at that moment both boys took from him, very quickly, his watch, guard chain, handkerchief, and notebook. If the old man felt a hand in any of his pockets, he cried out, and then the game began again. Later the boys went out again to do some more work. When they had gone, Fagin turned to Oliver. "Take my advice, my dear," he said. "Make them your models, especially the Dodger. He'll be a great man himself, and will make you one too, if you copy him. Is my handkerchief hanging out of my pocket, my dear?" "Yes, sir," said Oliver. "See if you can take it out without my feeling it, just as you saw them doing it when we were playing." Oliver held up the bottom of the pocket with one hand, as he had seen the Dodger hold it, and pulled the handkerchief lightly out of it with the other. "Has it gone?" asked Fagin. "Here it is, sir," said Oliver, showing it in his hand. "You're a clever boy, my dear," said the old gentleman, putting his hand on Oliver's head. "I've never seen a quicker boy. If you go on like this, you'll be the greatest man in London. Now come here and I'll show you how to take the marks out of handkerchiefs." Oliver wondered what the connection was between playing at stealing from the old gentleman's pocket and becoming a great man. But he followed him quietly to the table and was soon deeply involved in his new study. Oliver remained in Fagin's room for many days, picking the marks and names out of the handkerchiefs and sometimes playing the same game as before. One evening, two young ladies came to visit, and a very cheerful party followed. Oliver thought they were very nice, friendly girls. The Dodger and Charlie Bates went out to work every day, but sometimes came home with no handkerchiefs, and Fagin would get very angry. Once he even knocked them both down the stairs and sent them to bed with no dinner because they had returned with nothing. At last, the morning came when Oliver was allowed to go out to work with the two other boys. There had been no handkerchiefs for him to work on for several days, and there was not very much to eat for dinner. The three boys set out, but they walked so slowly that Oliver thought they were not going to work at all. Then suddenly the Dodger stopped and put his finger to his lips. "What's the matter?" demanded Oliver. "Be quiet," replied the Dodger. "Do you see that old man outside the bookshop? He's the one." Oliver looked from the Dodger to Charlie Bates with great surprise and confusion, but he had been told not to ask questions. The two boys walked quickly and secretly across the road towards the old gentleman. Oliver followed behind them, watching in silent amazement. The old gentleman looked quite rich. He wore gold glasses, white trousers, and had an expensive walking stick under his arm. He had picked up a book and was standing there reading it with great concentration, just as if he were in his own armchair at home. Oliver, his eyes wide with horror and alarm, watched as the Dodger put his hand in the old gentleman's pocket, took out a handkerchief, and handed it to Charlie Bears. Then the two of them ran round the corner as fast as they could. Suddenly, the whole mystery of the handkerchiefs, and the watches, and the jewels, and Fagin became clear. Oliver stood for a moment in terror, the blood rushing through him until he felt he was on fire. Then, confused and frightened, he started to run. At the same time, the old gentleman, putting his hand to his pocket and realizing his handkerchief was missing, turned round. He saw Oliver running away, so he naturally thought Oliver was the thief. With loud cries of "Stop thief!" he ran after Oliver with the book still in his hand. The old gentleman was not the only one who started shouting. The Dodger and Charlie Bates, not wanting to attract attention to themselves by running down the street, had stopped round the first corner. When they realized what was happening, they also shouted, "Stop thief!" and joined in the chase like good citizens. The cry of "Stop thief!" always causes great excitement. Everybody in the street stopped what they were doing and began to shout themselves. Many joined in the chase with enthusiasm, and soon there was a big crowd running after Oliver. Finally, they caught the exhausted boy. He fell down on the pavement and the crowd gathered round him. "Is this the boy?" they asked the old gentleman. "Yes," he answered, leaning over Oliver, "but I'm afraid he's hurt himself." "I did that," said a huge young man proudly, "and I hurt my hand doing it." The old gentleman looked at him with an expression of dislike. Oliver lay on the ground, covered with mud and dust, and bleeding from the mouth, and looked wildly at all the faces surrounding him. At that moment a policeman arrived and took Oliver by the collar. "Come on, get up," he said roughly. "It wasn't me, sir," said Oliver, looking round. "It was two other boys. They're here somewhere." "Oh, no, they aren't," replied the policeman. In fact, he was right, as the Dodger and Charlie had quietly disappeared as soon as the crowd had caught Oliver. "Come on, get up. Don't hurt him," said the old gentleman. "I won't," said the policeman, tearing Oliver's jacket haul off his back as he lifted him up. The three of them started walking, followed by the excited crowd. Chapter 5. Oliver's life changes. Oliver was taken to the nearest police station. The officer at the gate looked at the boy. "Another young thief, eh?" He turned to the old gentleman. "Are you the person who was robbed, sir?" "Yes, I am," replied the old gentleman. "But I'm not sure that this boy actually took the handkerchief. I don't really want to take him to court." Too late. He must go before the magistrate now. Oliver was locked in a small stone cell which was disgustingly dim and smelly. As the key turned in the lock, the old gentleman said to himself thoughtfully, "There's something in that boy's face. He could be innocent. Where have I seen someone like him before?" After thinking about this for a few minutes, he said, "No, it must be imagination." He sighed unhappily and began reading the book again. Some time later, the officer touched his shoulder and told him that the court was ready. A magistrate was a judge who dealt with small crimes in local courts, and the magistrate for this district was well known. His name was Mr. Fang, and he was a disagreeable, bad-tempered man. Today he was in a particularly bad mood. He frowned angrily at the old gentleman and asked sharply, "Who are you?" "My name, sir, is Brownlow." "Officer, what is this man charged with?" "He's not charged, sir," answered the officer. "He's accusing the boy." The magistrate looked at Mr. Brownlow from head to foot. "And what have you got to say?" Mr. Brownlow began to explain. "I was standing outside a bookshop." "Be quiet, sir," shouted Mr. Fang. "Policeman, now! You arrested the boy. What happened?" The policeman told the magistrate what he had heard and how he had searched Oliver afterwards and found nothing. "Are there any witnesses?" asked the magistrate. "None," answered the policeman. Mr. Fang then turned to Mr. Brownlow and angrily told him to describe what had happened. Mr. Brownlow explained that he had run after the boy only because he saw him running away. He did not think that the boy was the actual thief, and he hoped that the boy would not be punished. "He's been hurt already," he added, "and now I'm afraid he's very ill." "I don't believe that for a moment," said Mr. Fang unpleasantly. He turned to Oliver. "Come now, don't try any clever tricks with me. What's your name?" he demanded. Oliver tried to reply, but he was too weak to speak. He was deadly pale, and he felt the room spinning round him. At last he managed to whisper a request for water, but the magistrate refused angrily. Suddenly, Oliver fainted and fell to the floor. Mr. Fang stared at him angrily. 3 months' prison, he said immediately. "Let him lie there. He'll soon be tired of that." Mr. Fang stood up. "This court is now closed." At that moment, a man in an old black coat rushed in. "Stop!" he shouted. "Don't take the boy away. I saw it all. I'm the bookshop owner." Mr. Fang's face was black with anger at this unexpected interruption, but the bookshop owner demanded to be heard. He described exactly what had really happened. He had seen 2 boys steal the handkerchief and then run away, leaving Oliver to be arrested. In a final burst of bad temper, Mr. Fang said that his time had been wasted. He announced that Oliver was innocent and ordered everybody out of the court. The order was obeyed, and as Mr. Brownlow turned to go down the street, he saw Oliver lying on the pavement, shaking, his face as white as death. "Poor boy," said Mr. Brownlow, bending over him. He called a coach quickly, laid Oliver on the seat, and drove away. The coach stopped at a neat house in a quiet, shady street in North London. Oliver was gently carried into a bed and received more care and kindness than he had ever had in his life. But he had a fever, and for many days he lay there unconscious. When he eventually awoke, weak, thin and pale, he looked anxiously around the room. "What room is this? Where am I?" he said. "This is not the place I fell asleep in." Mrs. Bedwin, the motherly old housekeeper, heard his words and instantly came to him. "Hush, be quiet, my dear, or you'll be ill again. Lie down." He lay down and woke up again much later. After a while he was able to sit up in a chair, although he was still too weak to walk. In this new position he could see a picture of a woman hanging on the wall opposite. "Who is that, madam?" he asked the old housekeeper. "I don't know, my dear." "Do you like it?" The eyes looked so sad and they seemed to be staring at me, as if the person was alive and wanted to speak to me but couldn't. "You're weak and nervous after your illness," Mrs. Bedwin said kindly. "Don't worry about things like that." Later that day, Mr. Brownlow came in, having heard that the boy was a little better at last. He was delighted to see that Oliver could sit up. But when he saw Oliver's face clearly, Mr. Brownlow stared hard at him. "I hope you're not angry with me, sir," said Oliver anxiously. No, not in the least," he replied. Then he turned to the housekeeper. "But look, Mrs. Bedwin, look there." He pointed to the picture of the woman above Oliver's head, and then to the boy's face. It was a living copy of the picture. Even the expression was the same. Oliver did not understand what was happening. He was so alarmed by Mr. Brownlow's excitement that he fainted once more. The Dodger and Charlie Bates had left the crowd which was chasing Oliver as soon as they could. They went back to their house through the narrow streets, using a complicated route in case anyone was following them. Once they were safely away from other people, Charlie Bates rolled on the ground and laughed and laughed. "Ha, ha, ha, when I saw Oliver running away so fast, round all the corners bumping into walls, and all the time I had the handkerchief in my pocket. Ha, ha, ha!" "But what'll Fagin say?" asked the Dodger. "What do you mean?" The Dodger said nothing more but led Charlie Bates into the house and up the stairs. When Fagin saw them enter, he rose to his feet. "Where's Oliver?" he asked them furiously. The two boys looked uneasily at each other but said nothing. Fagin took hold of the Dodger's collar and shook him violently. "Tell me, or I'll kill you." The Dodger slid out of his coat in one smooth movement, leaving Fagin holding only the empty coat. "The police have got him," he said reluctantly. He looked round for a weapon to fight with, but Fagin already had a heavy metal pot in his hand. He threw it hard at the Dodger but missed, and hit Charlie Bates, who started to shout with tear. Suddenly all this noise and confusion was silenced by a deep voice at the door. "What the devil's going on here?" the voice demanded. The owner of the voice was a big man of about 35, in a black coat and very dirty trousers, with a brown hat on his head and a dirty handkerchief around his neck. He also had a 3-day-old beard. A white dog with torn ears followed him into the room. The man kicked the dog into a corner and looked round at the signs of battle. "Are they trying to murder you, Fagin?" "I would if I was them. I'd have done it long ago. Now, give me some beer, and don't poison it." It was said as a joke, but if the man had seen the evil look on Fagin's face, he might have thought the warning was a necessary one. Fagin produced some beer, and as the fight appeared to be over, everybody sat down. In the conversation that followed, Fagin told the newcomer that Oliver had been caught by the police. "I'm afraid, Mr. Sykes," he said, "the boy may say something which will get us into trouble." "Very likely," said Bill Sykes, smiling unkindly. "You've got problems, Fagin." "And I'm afraid," added Fagin, ignoring Sykes's remark, "that if we're in trouble, then a lot of other people will be in trouble too, if you understand me, my dear." Sykes turned angrily towards the old man. There was a silence. Then Sykes said, "Somebody must find out what's happened. If he hasn't said anything yet, we must catch him when he leaves the police station." Fagin nodded, but there was a difficulty. None of them wanted to go anywhere near a police station. The problem was solved with the arrival of the 2 young ladies whom Oliver had met one evening in Fagin's house. "Nancy, my dear," Fagin said. He smiled sweetly at one of the young ladies. "Can you go to find out what's happened to Oliver?" The young lady answered calmly, "No, I won't." "You're the only one here that the police in this district don't know," said Sykes. "She'll go, Fagin." "No," repeated Nancy. "Yes, she will, Fagin." Sykes was right. With a mixture of threats and promises, he soon persuaded Nancy to go. She set off at once and at the police station pretended to be a shy, frightened girl. "Is my poor little brother Oliver here?" she asked the officer with the keys. "He's not here," the officer replied. "The gentleman's got him." "The gentleman? Oh no, what gentleman?" cried Nancy, very upset. The policeman explained that Oliver had become ill, and the old gentleman had taken him to his house in the Pentonville district of North London. Nancy, still looking terribly upset, left the station and hurried back to Fagin's house with this news. As soon as he heard it, Sykes called his white dog, put on his hat, and left without saying goodbye to anyone. "We must find him," Fagin said urgently to the rest of them. "No one can stay here. It's too dangerous now. All of you, walk around Pentonville and keep your ears open. Don't come back until you have some news of Oliver. If you can, kidnap him. We've got to keep him quiet before he starts talking about us to his new friends." With these words, he pushed them all from his room and double-locked the door behind them. Then he took out his hidden box and very carefully hid all the watches and the jewellery beneath his clothes. Chapter 6. Oliver is found again. Oliver began to recover and slowly regain his strength. The picture that had caused Mr. Brownlow's excitement was taken down from the wall and was not mentioned again. Oliver was disappointed at the disappearance of the picture, since he liked the woman's face, but he had many other things to think about now. They were happy days while Oliver was getting better. He played cards with Mrs. Bedwin and listened to stories about her family. The days were all so quiet and relaxing after the hardships and poverty of his previous life. Mr. Brownlow bought him a new suit and new shoes, and Oliver's dirty old clothes were given away. One day Mr. Brownlow asked him to come to his study for a little talk. Oliver went in and sat down. He looked at Mr. Brownlow's serious face in alarm. "Don't tell me you're going to send me away, sir, please," he exclaimed. "Let me stay here. I could help with the housework. Please, sir." "My dear child, don't be afraid," said Mr. Brownlow kindly. "I won't desert you. I believe that you're a good boy, not a common thief. You told me you're an orphan. That seems to be the truth. But I want to hear now the whole story of your life, and how you came to be with the boys I saw you with that day." Oliver began his story, but was soon interrupted by the arrival of Mr. Grimwig, an old friend of Mr. Brownlow's. Mr. Grimwig was a fierce old gentleman and very fond of arguments. He clearly knew all about Oliver, and inspected him closely. "So this is the Hoy, is it?" he said at last. Oliver bowed politely and was introduced by Mr. Brownlow. Tea was then brought in, and during the meal Mr. Grimwig stared so hard at Oliver that the boy felt rather confused. Eventually Mr. Grimwig whispered to Mr. Brownlow, "He may be a good-looking boy, but I think he's deceiving you, my good friend." "Nonsense," said Mr. Brownlow, becoming angry. "Well, we'll see," answered his friend. "We'll see." Later that afternoon, Mr. Brownlow wanted to return some books to a bookseller and to send some money for new books that he had already collected. Mr. Grimwig suggested that Oliver should go. "He'll be sure to deliver everything safely," he said with a smile. "Yes, please let me take them," said Oliver, delighted to be of use. Mr. Brownlow hesitated, but Mr. Grimwig's smile had annoyed him. "Very well," he said. "Here are the books, Oliver, and a £5 note. The bookseller will give you 10 shillings change." "I won't be 10 minutes," replied Oliver eagerly, and he ran out into the street. "So you expect him to come back, do you?" inquired Mr. Grimwig. "Yes, I do," said Mr. Brownlow, smiling confidently. "Don't you?" "No. He has a new suit of clothes, some valuable books, and a £5 note in his pocket. He'll join his old friends the thieves and laugh at you. If he comes back, I'll eat my hat." The two men sat by the window with a pocket watch between them and waited for Oliver's return. Oliver hurried through the streets to the bookshop, thinking how lucky he was. Suddenly there was a loud scream behind him. "Oh, my dear brother!" Before he could look round, a pair of arms was thrown tightly around his neck. "Don't!" he cried, struggling. "Let go! Why are you stopping me? Who is it?" The young woman holding him started to cry loudly. "I found him! Oh, Oliver! You naughty Hoy! To make me suffer so much! Come home immediately, you cruel boy!" She burst into tears and several people stopped to stare at what was happening. "What's the matter?" asked one of the watching women. "He ran away from his parents a month ago," the young woman said. "They're hard-working, respectable people, and he left them to join a gang of thieves and had characters and almost broke Mother's heart." "Go home, you horrible child," said another woman. "Yes, go back to your parents," said a third. "But I haven't got any," replied Oliver, greatly alarmed. "I haven't got a sister either. I'm an orphan. I live in Pentonville." "Listen to him. Make him come home, the young woman said to the crowd, or he'll kill his dear mother and father and break my heart. Suddenly, Oliver recognized the woman he had seen in Fagin's house. "It's Nancy," he said without thinking. "You see?" cried Nancy to the crowd. "He knows me." Just then, a big man ran out of a beer shop, followed by a white dog. "What's this? Young Oliver, come home to your poor mother, you young devil. And what books are these? You've stolen them, haven't you? Give them that me." The man, who was Bill Sikes, seized Oliver with one strong hand and hit him on the head with the other. "That'll do him good," shouted some of the crowd. "It's the only way to treat boys like him." Bill Sikes held on to Oliver's arm. "Come on, you young thief." Still weak from illness and terrified by the growling dog, Oliver could not resist. He was taken through the dark, narrow streets at great speed. Sikes and Nancy gave him no chance to escape, and Oliver had no breath to call out for help. All too quickly, he was back in Fagin's house, where his old friends were waiting for him. "Delighted to see you looking so well, my dear," Fagin said, bowing politely. "Why didn't you write and say you were coming? We'd have got something warm for supper." The Dodger and Charlie Bates roared with laughter, and the Dodger began looking through the books Oliver had with him. "Give them back," Oliver cried. "Those books belong to the kind old gentleman who took me into his home. Send him back the books and the money. He'll think I stole them." "You're right," laughed Fagin. "He'd think that." Oliver jumped to his feet and ran wildly from the room, shouting for help. The Dodger and Fagin caught him easily and brought him back. Then the old man picked up a long piece of wood. "So you wanted to get away, my dear, did you? Wanted to call the police and get help? We'll cure you of that." He hit Oliver hard on the shoulders with the stick. He was raising it for a second hit when Nancy rushed forward and, seizing the piece of wood, threw it into the fire. "I won't let you do it, Fagin," she shouted. "You've got him again. Isn't that enough? Now leave him alone." Fagin and Sikes looked at each other, shocked by her reaction. "You'd better keep quiet, my girl," growled Sikes. "No, I won't," cried the girl wildly. "Now you've got the boy, you'll turn him into a thief and a liar. Isn't that enough, without killing him too?" She rushed at Fagin and would have hit him if Sikes had not held her arm so tightly that she couldn't move. She struggled wildly for a while, then, exhausted, she fainted. Sikes laid her down in the corner as surprised as Fagin at her anger. "She can be really wild when she's angry," Sikes said. Fagin wiped his forehead. "That's the trouble with women," he said. "But she's a clever girl in her work." Then Charlie Bates and the Dodger took away Oliver's expensive new suit, gave him some old clothes, and locked him up in a dark room. Oliver fell tired and ill, and was soon fast asleep. Chapter 7. The Robbery. A few days later, a visitor arrived in London from Oliver's hometown. He was a large, fat man and very proud of his hat, which showed the world that he was a most important official. It was, in fact, Mr. Bumble the Beadle, Oliver's old enemy. Mr. Bumble had completed his business in the city and had just finished a most satisfactory meal in a pub. He pulled up his chair to the fire to enjoy his hot gin and water in comfort and opened the newspaper. The first thing he saw was this notice: "A reward of £5 is offered for any information leading to the discovery of a young boy, Oliver Twist, who was kidnapped from his home in Pentonville last Thursday evening. I am also very interested in any information about his past." There was then a full description of Oliver's clothes and appearance, and Mr. Brownlow's full address. Mr. Bumble rubbed his eyes, read the notice again, and was at the address in less than 10 minutes. He was shown into Mr. Brownlow's study, where the old gentleman and his friend, Mr. Grimwig, were sitting. "Do you know where the poor boy is now?" Mr. Brownlow asked, when the beadle had explained the reason for his visit. Mr. Bumble shook his head. "Do you know anything good about him?" asked Mr. Grimwig, looking closely at Mr. Bumble's face. Mr. Bumble shook his head again, very seriously, and turned down the corners of his mouth. "Then tell us everything you know about him," said Mr. Brownlow impatiently. Mr. Bumble put down his hat, unbuttoned his coat, folded his arms, and sat back in his chair. He spoke in his most important and official voice, and talked for 20 minutes. His listeners heard all the details of Oliver's illegitimate birth, and how generously he had been treated as a workhouse orphan. They heard how he had always been an ungrateful and dangerous child, violently attacking another boy and finally running away from the house where he had been working. The old gentleman shook his head sadly and gave Mr. Bumble the £5. "I would have been happy to give you 3 times the amount if your story had proved that the boy was good." If Mr. Bumble had known this earlier, he might have told a different story, but now it was too late, so he took the money and left. Mr. Brownlow walked up and down his room for several minutes, deep in thought. He rang the bell for Mrs. Bedwin, his housekeeper, and told her what he had heard. "I don't believe it," she said with great certainty. "I was right," said Mr. Grimwig with satisfaction. "You should have listened to what I said," Mr. Brownlow said angrily. "Never let me hear the boy's name again. Never. Remember that, Mrs. Bedwin." There were sad hearts at Mr. Brownlow's house that night. Meanwhile, in another part of London, Oliver remained a prisoner. Fagin had told Oliver how ungrateful he had been to run away. He had told him that he would have died of hunger without Fagin's kindness. He went on to tell Oliver the story of another young hoy who had gone to the police to tell them about the gang, but who had finally been hanged one morning for being a thief. Fagin described the hanging in terrifying detail, and said that he hoped he would never have to tell the police about Oliver, and see Oliver with a rope around his neck. Oliver felt his blood turn cold. He remained locked in a room for many days, seeing nobody between early morning and midnight. He spent his time thinking sadly about his friends in Pentonville. After a week, he was free to wander round the house during the day. It was a dirty place full of rats and insects, but no other living thing. All the windows were closed and covered with wood and metal bars that kept out the light. One afternoon, the Dodger and Charlie Bates were at home, and they started telling Oliver about their lives as thieves. "Why don't you become one?" Charlie asked him. "We all are here. Both of us, and Fagin, Sykes, Nancy, all of us." "I don't want to be," replied Oliver. "I wish they'd let me go." "But it's a good life," the Dodger said, taking some coins from his pocket and throwing them up in the air. "What does it matter where the money comes from?" he said, laughing. If you don't steal it, someone else will. You can be sure of that. Fagin entered at this point with two young men and joined in the conversation. One of the young men had just come out of prison, and there were many cheerful jokes about his very short haircut. Everybody sat around the fire talking and laughing for hours. Fagin told Oliver how good the Dodger was at his job, and what a friendly boy Charlie was. It was, without doubt, an interesting evening for Oliver, after so many days locked up alone. After that evening, he was rarely on his own again. He spent a lot of time with the Dodger and Charlie and often played the handkerchief game with them. At other times, Fagin would tell them all about robberies he had committed in his younger days, telling the stories so well and putting in so many funny derails that Oliver could not stop laughing, even though he knew it was wrong. Fagin knew what he was doing. He had made sure that Oliver was so lonely and miserable that he would be desperate for any friends, however criminal. Slowly and deliberately, Fagin was trying to poison the young boy's mind. One damp, cold, windy night a few weeks later, Fagin put on his heavy coat and, with the collar pulled up high to hide his face, left his home. He walked fast through the streets, never losing his way even in the darkest places. Finally, he reached an evil, narrow street lit only by a single lamp. He knocked on a door, said something quietly to the person who opened it, then walked upstairs. Bill Sikes was sitting by his fire with his dog when Fagin entered. The room was a small, dark place with almost no furniture. Nancy was there too, and Fagin glanced at her uneasily. He had not seen her since she had attacked him to stop him hitting Oliver. However, she seemed to have forgotten all about it, because she told him to pull up a chair and warm himself by the fire. "I'm ready for business," Bill Sikes said, looking at Fagin suspiciously. "Say what you have to say, Fagin." "It's about the robbery at Chertsey." "Bill," answered Fagin, "some lovely silver in that house down there." I know, Sikes said. "I was down there 2 nights ago to have a look at the house, but it's locked like a prison at night, all except one part." "Where's that?" asked Fagin, bending his head forwards, his eyes staring excitedly at Sikes. "Do you think I'm stupid? I'm not telling you. Anyway, what we need is a boy." "So there's a small place where only a boy can enter the house?" asked Fagin. "Maybe, but we need a boy." There was silence for a time while Fagin thought. Then he made a sign to Sikes to tell Nancy to leave the room. "Don't worry," Sikes said. "You can trust her, she won't talk. Isn't that right?" "Of course it's right," answered the young woman, taking a large drink from the bottle on the table and laughing. "Anyway, Fagin, I know your idea is for Oliver to do the job." "You're a clever girl," said Fagin, smiling evilly. "That's exactly what I had in mind. Listen, Bill. The boy's been training for a few weeks, and it's time he did some work. He's the smallest one anyway." "Is he safe?" asked Sikes. "Because if he tries any tricks on me, I'll kill him." "He'll be ours for life. He feels he's one of us." "And this job will make him feel like that," said Fagin eagerly. "The boy looks so innocent, he's perfect. And we've got to include him in some crime as soon as we can. Otherwise, if he escapes now, he can tell the police about us and stay tree himself." So it was decided, that Oliver would help Sykes with the robbery in 2 days' time. The plan was discussed in great detail and all the arrangements made. By then, Sykes was very drunk and Fagin got up to leave. As he put on his coat, he stared hard at Nancy, frowning a little. No, he was sure he could trust her. She was loyal. The next night, Oliver was alone in Fagin's house when Nancy entered. She was so nervous and white-faced that Oliver asked her if she was ill. "God forgive me," she said, beating her hands together. "I never thought I would do this." "Has anything happened?" asked the Hoy. "What is it?" She sat with her back to him and hid her face with her hands. After a while, she said, "I don't know why I feel so strange sometimes. Come on, Oliver, are you ready? You have to come with me to Bill's house." "Why?" "Oh, nothing important." Oliver did not believe her, but he thought that at last this might be an opportunity to escape. So he said, rather too quickly, "I'm ready." Nancy guessed what he was thinking. "Oliver," she said, "this is not the time to escape. I've saved you once, and I will again. But if anything happens tonight, it might mean my death." She said this so seriously that Oliver decided it must be true. He was quiet while they walked quickly through the streets to Sykes's house. Inside his room, Sykes sat Oliver down on a chair. "Did he come quietly?" he asked Nancy. "Quiet as a mouse." "Glad to hear it," said Sykes. "Now listen to me, boy." He put a gun against Oliver's head. "If you say one word when you're outside with me, I'll shoot you. Understand?" Oliver nodded, trying hard not to tremble. Sykes and Oliver started out at 5 o'clock in the morning while it was still dark. They crossed from one side of London to the other. At first, the streets were empty, then shops began to open and people started going to work. Gradually, the noise and traffic increased, and as they passed through the meat market at Smithfield, Oliver was amazed by the sight and smells of so many animals and by the huge crowds of people, all pushing and swearing and shouting. But Bill Sykes marched on without stopping. Later in the day, they were given a lift in a horse and cart from West London out into the country. Night fell, and after walking a few more miles down country roads, they finally arrived at an old house standing alone by a river. It was dark and seemed to be empty. They went inside without knocking. Inside were two other men who, at Sykes's command, produced food and drink for him and the boy. Then Sykes told Oliver to get some sleep, as they would be going out again later that night. Oliver still had no idea of the purpose of this expedition, but his head ached with tiredness, and he soon fell asleep. At 1:30, the men got up and checked their equipment, gathering several sticks as well. Sykes and the man called Toby left the house together, with Oliver walking between them. There was now a thick fog, and the night was very still as they hurried through the deserted streets of the nearby town. Out in the country again, they walked down several small roads until finally they stopped at a house surrounded by a high wall. As quick as lightning, Toby climbed up and pulled Oliver after him. Inside the garden, they crept towards the house, and now, for the first time, Oliver realized in horror that the purpose of the expedition was robbery, and maybe even murder. Bill Sykes broke open a small window at the back of the house. then shone his light into Oliver's face. "Now listen, I'm going to put you through here. Go straight through into the hall and onto the front door and let us in. And if you don't, you can be sure I'll shoot you." Oliver, stupid with terror, was lilted through the window into the house. Desperately, he decided to try to run upstairs and warn the family. He began to creep forwards. Suddenly, there was a loud noise from the hall. "Come back!" shouted Sykes. "Back! Back!" Oliver stood still, frozen with tear. A light appeared, then two men on the stairs, then a sudden bright flash and a loud bang. Oliver staggered back. Sykes seized the boy's collar through the window and pulled him back out into the garden. "They've hit Hint!" shouted Sykes. "He's bleeding!" A hell rang loudly above the noise of more gunshots and the shouts of men. Oliver felt himself being carried across rough ground, and then he saw and heard no more.